My wife asked me if she could dance with him. With my best friend. The question came with a forced innocence, a light smile on her face, as if it were something trivial, unimportant. But, at that moment, the blood that was flowing in my veins froze. I knew. Maybe I always knew. The way she looked at him, the way he behaved when we were all together. How had I been blind for so long? I responded coldly, almost as a reflex. But the truth is that the anger inside me was boiling. Every word that came out of my mouth was a weapon, a desperate attempt to hurt her, to provoke the same pain that I was beginning to feel spreading in my chest. To dance. Why not? If you want to dance with him so bad, go ahead. Enjoy. She hesitated, her eyes searched mine for a moment, and in that brief second of silence, our entire story flashed before me. Years together, laughter, plans, and now this. That doubt in his eyes confirmed everything I needed to know. It wasn't just a dance. It never was. She wanted more. She always wanted more. He, on the other hand, was leaning against the bar, pretending not to hear the conversation. His eyes avoided mine, focused on some distant point, perhaps in a weak attempt to appear disinterested. But the lack of interest was a sham. I knew what he was thinking, how he felt about her. And the most painful part? He already had her, long before that insidious request for a simple dance. I couldn't help the feeling of betrayal tearing at my soul. Not only for the woman I swore I knew, but for the man who was always by my side. The man I trusted like a brother, who shared the same jokes, who knew my darkest secrets. And now, as the party music echoed around us, he seemed more distant than ever. How could I be so naive? So are you going to dance or not? I asked once again, now more bitter, almost challenging her. And she, with that same forced smile, walked past me. He didn't say a word, didn't make any gesture that suggested regret or doubt. Just walked up to him. I watched helplessly as she approached, her steps slow, almost calculated, as if she were testing my limits, testing how much I could take before I exploded. They danced. Slowly. The world around us seemed to disappear, the party lights became mere blurs of colors, the music became a hum in the background. All I could see was their movement. The touch. The proximity. Her look, a mix of boldness and provocation, as if she wanted me to see, for me to understand. And he, with that always confident posture, finally looked at me. There was something about that look that hit me like a punch in the gut. So many signs that I ignored over time. The jokes between them, the silent conversations that were interrupted when I arrived. Her excuses for being late. The messages he sent late at night were always justified with some irrelevant reason. Everything made sense now. They were laughing at me, behind my back, enjoying every second of my blindness, while I believed the lies they told. The alcohol in my system didn't help. On the contrary, it only intensified the whirlwind of thoughts. Every detail of that night was etched in my mind. How she fixed her hair before getting up, how he straightened his tie when he saw her walking towards him. A game of complicity that I was not part of. On that dance floor, they no longer needed words. The silence between the two said it all. It was as if they had matched each step, each touch. While the other couples around danced carefree, they were involved in a dark choreography that only I could see. I wanted to scream, I wanted to end it all. But I felt paralyzed, helpless. The anger was growing, but at the same time, a strange feeling of acceptance was emerging. They were already together. They always have been, in some way. I was just the last to know. What was left for me to do? Confront them there, in front of everyone? Destroy the facade of civility we have built over the years? Or simply wait, let the poison of betrayal eat away at everything until there was nothing left? As I watched, a question throbbed in my mind. Since when? Since when did I lose my wife to my best friend? When exactly did the lies start to take over our relationship? That was the real doubt that consumed me. She came back. He smiled at me as if nothing had happened. And I, once again, was forced to swallow the bitter truth. But now, something was about to change. Because I would no longer be the naive and blind man. No, this time, I would know everything. And when they found out, they would regret it. How long did she think she could hide the past? How long did he believe I would remain silent? It was clear to me now, that night was not the end, it was just the beginning of a truth that was about to be revealed. The room was decorated with soft lights, the rhythmic sound of music filled the air, and guests circulated among smiles, conversations and glasses of wine. It was a party like any other, but for him, that night was already marked by an almost palpable tension. Ethan, he watched from afar, with a glass of whiskey in his hand, every gesture, every look of the woman he still called his wife. Olivia, she was the type of woman who effortlessly attracted attention. Not because of extravagance, but because of the graceful way he moved. She always had that charming way of making everything seem natural. His laugh, although discreet, used to echo like an invitation for everyone around him to feel at ease. And for years, that's how Ethan felt by his side. Safe. Happy. Loved. Or, at least, that's what he believed. They had been married for almost 7 years. 7 years of trips, dinners, and moments that, at first glance, seemed worthy of any happy family album. Olivia's career as an interior designer kept her busy, but it also brought a dose of excitement to the couple's routine, always with new ideas, projects and places to explore. Ethan, on the other hand, was a businessman. Organized, methodical, the type of person who planned everything months in advance. His technology company was on the rise, and it kept him away from home more than he would have liked, but he had never doubted the strength of what he had with it. Olivia was passionate about the idea of building homes, of transforming spaces into refuges, and Ethan admired that about her. She seemed to have a gift for creating warm, welcoming environments, something he always interpreted as a reflection of her character. I believed she did the same with their relationship. But lately, things have felt out of whack. As if the environment they had built was slowly falling apart, without him realizing the exact reason. Across the room, Olivia was in a lively conversation with a group of friends. Her dark blue dress contrasted with her fair skin, and her long brown hair fell softly over her shoulders. She was smiling, but it was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ethan knew this. He had seen that smile many times before, and whenever it appeared, it was followed by a strange feeling of distance between the two. He remembered the times when that smile was genuine, when her eyes lit up when she saw him enter a room, when her touches were light and natural, without weight or hesitation. But lately, something had changed. It wasn't easy to pinpoint when exactly things started to deteriorate. Maybe it was during one of Olivia's countless projects, or maybe it was on Ethan's increasingly frequent work trips. He always believed that the solid foundation they built would withstand the elements. But that night, as he watched her from afar, he had the first time the feeling that maybe he was wrong. And then there was Ryan. Ethan's best friend since college. A charismatic man, always with a ready smile and a joke on the tip of his tongue. Ryan was the kind of person who made others feel special with just a casual conversation. His presence was contagious, and he had always been an important part of Ethan and Olivia's social circle. To Ethan, he was more than a friend, he was a soul brother. A confidant. Someone with whom he shared everything, from the challenges of his professional life to his most intimate doubts about his marriage. In recent months, however, Ryan seemed to be always there when Olivia needed something. Advice, an opinion on a project, or even company for a coffee when Ethan was traveling. He had never seen a problem with this before. After all, wasn't that the role of a good friend? Be there when needed. But that night, as Ryan chatted casually with other guests, something deeply bothered Ethan. Why did Ryan seem to know things about Olivia that he didn't know himself? Little details, like her new projects or her latest reads. Details that were previously shared only between the two, husband and wife. Now, it seemed like Ryan was more involved in his life than Ethan cared to admit. Olivia, however, continued to act with the same naturalness. As if nothing was wrong. She floated from one group of guests to another, her laughter echoing in different parts of the room, but the distance between them was stark. Ethan wondered if she felt this separation too or if she was simply ignoring what was in front of her. And then came the question. Simple, but devastating in its disguised innocence. Can I dance with him? The sound of Olivia's voice struck Ethan like a knife, and the moment that should have been insignificant became proof that something was deeply wrong. He looked at her coldly, trying to hide the storm of emotions that was forming inside him. With Ryan? The question hung in the air, suspended like a burden between the two. Olivia smiled, a smile that said more than any words. There was no visible malice, but something in her expression disarmed him. There was hesitation. A shadow of doubt that she tried to hide behind that polite smile. And that was enough for Ethan to feel the ground disappear beneath his feet. Ryan, in turn, remained at a safe distance, without being directly involved in the exchange of words. He knew. Ethan knew that he knew. And what made everything even worse was the fact that, for a moment, the dance seemed like just an insignificant detail amidst the whirlwind of emotions that was forming between them. The party continued, oblivious to the drama that was unfolding in silence. The other couples danced, toasted, laughed. But to Ethan, the music seemed louder, the laughter more distant, and the tension between him and Olivia thicker than ever. He responded, in a calculated and bitter way, accepting the reality that was unfolding before him, but aware that this was just the tip of the iceberg. The real challenge was yet to come. What Olivia and Ryan shared, whatever it was, went beyond a simple dance. The party continued as if nothing was wrong. The music flowed, laughter echoed throughout the room, and Ethan watched everything as if he were trapped in a bubble. Every sound, every movement seemed distant, while his focus remained on Olivia and Ryan, who were now talking closer than he would have liked. Her smile was charming, as always, and her gestures flowed naturally. But for Ethan, there was something strange about every interaction. Everything seemed like a calculated game, as if he were outside, watching a play whose script he didn't know. He wondered if it was all in his head. Was he exaggerating? Maybe it was the exhaustion of the long weeks of accumulated work, the constant pressure of keeping everything running in your company. But even so, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was slipping through his fingers. The complicity between Olivia and Ryan was there, evident, but at a level that he could no longer ignore. Olivia's gaze met Ethan's from across the room. For a moment she hesitated, perhaps aware of the discomfort she was causing. But then, as if deciding this was the moment to test her own limits, she turned her attention to Ryan, touching his arm in a way that was almost casual but intimate enough to ignite the spark of doubt in Ethan. He approached slowly, disguising his discomfort behind a sip of whiskey. The words of Olivia and Ryan's conversation were irrelevant to him, what mattered was the atmosphere they shared. It wasn't just the physical proximity, but the invisible connection between the two. It was something that had always been there, he realized, but that he was only now beginning to see clearly. Ethan, is everything okay? Olivia's soft voice interrupted his thoughts. She looked at him with a worried expression, as if she had no idea what was going on in his mind. There was an artificial lightness to his speech, almost as if he was trying to calm him down before any confrontation. Of course, he replied, his voice firmer than he felt. Everything great. It was an obvious lie, but there was no reason to expose what was boiling inside. Not there. Not that night. Ryan, next to Olivia, maintained his usual smile, the same smile he always used to ease any uncomfortable situation. But Ethan noticed the slight tremor in his hands as he held the glass. Something was wrong with Ryan too. maybe not as calm as he wanted to seem. The night continued. The hours dragged by, and Ethan felt like every minute weighed more. That silent game between Olivia and Ryan consumed him. He withdrew a few times to breathe, trying not to let the feelings overwhelm him there, in front of everyone. But every time he returned to the hall, they were together. Laughing. Sharing jokes. Conversations. Gestures. Until the moment he feared so came. Olivia asked again, this time more directly, if she could dance with Ryan. The request seemed like a thin curtain for something much bigger, an excuse to be even closer. Ethan looked at the two, not responding immediately, allowing silence to envelop them. He didn't want to appear insecure, nor give in to the provocation that seemed so obvious. But at the same time, I couldn't escape the trap that was set. Sure, he said finally. His voice carried a bitter, almost challenging tone. It was as if he wanted to see how far this would go. How far were they willing to go, in front of him, with all eyes oblivious to what was really happening? Olivia smiled, and the touch she gave Ryan's arm as she guided him to the dance floor was like a punch to Ethan's gut. He watched every movement, trying to rationalize what he was seeing. It was just a dance. How many times had they danced at parties like this? But this time, there was something different, a closeness that had never existed before. As the two began to dance, the other couples around them seemed to disappear. Ethan focused on the way they moved, the synchronized rhythm, the discreet glances they exchanged. The tension built in his chest, constricting his breathing. He wanted to look away, wanted to force himself to believe he was exaggerating. But he couldn't. The music continued, slow and engaging, as Olivia and Ryan moved with a familiarity that Ethan had never noticed before. There was something about the way their bodies got closer, how Ryan's hands held her waist with a firmness that he could no longer ignore. And then, in the middle of a gentle turn, he saw it. The touch. A touch that could not be justified as innocent. Ryan's hands sliding down the curve of Olivia's back, the way she leaned slightly toward him, as if no one was watching, as if they were the only ones in the room. The emotional explosion inside Ethan was instantaneous, but he didn't show it. He remained there, motionless, fighting the urge to cross the room and interrupt what was clearly happening before his eyes. The smile on Olivia's face, the complicity in her movements, Ryan's calmness as he held her, everything screamed a truth that he was still trying to deny. But I couldn't anymore. When the music finally stopped, they walked away a little, still laughing, and the look Olivia gave Ryan was the final confirmation. This wasn't just a dance. It wasn't just a friendship. It was more. Much more. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine, as if the ground was opening up beneath his feet. The party continued around him, but for him, the world had stopped. The betrayal he feared so much was now real. And there was no turning back. The tension between Ethan, Olivia and Ryan had become a minefield, ready to explode. After the dance, which marked the turning point in Ethan's perception, he felt his world crumble in ways he never imagined possible. He knew he could no longer ignore the signs that were right in front of him. The night progressed, and the party guests continued to dance, drink and laugh, completely oblivious to the drama taking place in that silent triangle. Ethan moved away from the crowd. I needed air. He needed a moment to process what he had just seen, what he had just felt. He stepped out onto the porch, the cold night breeze hitting him hard, but it didn't ease the pressure in his chest. His hands were shaking, the glass of whiskey was already empty, but he didn't even realize when he had finished it. At that moment, memories began to surface. Small details of past events that, until that moment, he had ignored. The times Ryan would show up unexpectedly at home, always with an excuse to be around. The conversation stopped abruptly when he entered the room. The muffled laughter between Olivia and Ryan when Ethan was distracted. How had I not noticed before? How had he let that happen under his nose? His mind was now connecting all the dots of a long stretching web. The sound of the door opening behind him interrupted his thoughts. It was Olivia. She looked at him with an uncertain, almost suspicious expression, as if she knew something was about to happen but didn't know exactly what. Ethan looked away, unable to look at her at that moment. "Is everything okay?" she asked, in her usual soft voice, but now it sounded like a sharp knife. The silence between them was thick, filled with unspoken questions and answers that neither of them wanted to admit. Ethan knew that if he spoke at that moment, he would expose all his resentment, all the anger he had been repressing. "Why did you do that?" he asked finally, his voice hoarse. "Why did you dance with him? You knew what that would mean to me." Olivia was silent for a second, clearly taking time to think about her response. His once neutral expression began to harden. "It's just a dance, Ethan. I don't understand why you're so shaken." "It's not just a dance, Olivia," he snapped, turning to her, now unable to keep calm. "I saw the way you looked at him. It's not just that. It can't be. Something is going on between you, and I want to know what it is." The silence that followed that declaration was deafening. Olivia's face paled, and her breathing became noticeably shorter. She hesitated, her eyes avoiding Ethan's, which to him was a silent confirmation of his suspicions. Something deeper and darker was hidden there. Before Olivia could respond, the balcony door opened again. Ryan entered the scene, his expression one of concern and caution, as if he knew he was interrupting something important. "Is everything okay here?" he asked, as if he already knew the answer. Ethan slowly turned to him, his eyes fixed on the man he had until then considered his best friend. Ryan's discomfort was palpable, but he stood his ground, trying not to show nervousness. "Do you know what's going on, Ryan?" Ethan asked, his voice now low but filled with suppressed anger. "Because if you do, I suggest you tell me now." Ryan looked from Ethan to Olivia and back to Ethan, clearly uncomfortable. He knew there was no escape from that conversation. Something was about to come to light, something that would change everything. "Ethan, Ryan started, but was interrupted by Olivia. "No, Ryan, no," she said, urgency in her voice. "That's not what you think, Ethan." The desperation in Olivia's voice was obvious, but Ethan no longer believed her excuses. All he wanted was the truth. Just that. "So explain it to me," he said, taking a step toward her. "Tell me what I'm thinking wrong. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you have something to hide. And I'm done being the idiot here." Olivia looked at Ryan, and the silence between them spoke more than any words could. Ethan realized, in that moment, that the two were connected in a way he had never imagined. And then, something in Olivia broke. His defensive posture began to give way, and tears finally came to his eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, barely audible. I didn't want it to go this far." Ethan's heart sank. It was the confirmation he feared, but still wasn't prepared to hear. His mind refused to process the words she had just said. The world around them seemed to have stopped, and the only sound he could hear was his own breathing. "How long?" he asked, his voice cold and calculated. "How long has this been going on?" Olivia hesitated, and when she finally spoke, her voice was shaky. "A few months." Those words, although brief, echoed in Ethan's mind like a final sentence. Everything he had built with Olivia, all the love, the trust, was now in ruins. There were no more doubts. She had betrayed his trust, his love. She had betrayed the life they had built together. He looked at Ryan, waiting for him to say something, to defend himself, but what he saw was just silence. Ryan lowered his head, unable to meet Ethan's gaze. The betrayal was now exposed, and the air around them felt too heavy to breathe. Ethan didn't know whether to scream, cry or just walk away from everything. But what he knew was that this betrayal went far beyond a simple mistake. It was a complete break from the world he knew. And there, in the silence of that balcony, while the echoes of the party continued in the distance, Ethan knew that his life would never be the same. The revelation of the betrayal hung over all three of them like a storm that had finally broken. The impact was crushing, and the silence between them was suffocating. Ethan felt his mind spinning in circles as the weight of the truth dragged him into an abyss of pain and disillusionment. Ryan, still unable to meet Ethan's gaze, finally broke the silence. "Ethan, I never wanted this to happen. I swear. I tried to walk away, I tried to keep things from getting out of hand." "Tried?" Ethan repeated, his voice as cold as ice. "You tried to walk away while sleeping with my wife. While destroying what I believed to be our marriage. Is that what you call trying?" Ryan took a step back, visibly shaken by Ethan's suppressed anger but unable to defend himself. Olivia, on the other hand, looked panicked, tears running freely down her face as she desperately tried to find the right words to explain the unexplainable. "Ethan, please, I never wanted to hurt you," she said, her voice cracking. "I know I made a mistake, but—" "Wrong?" Ethan interrupted, anger finally breaking through his facade of control. "You destroyed everything. You betrayed me, made me look like a fool, and now you want to tell me you never wanted to hurt me?" Ethan's words came out like sharp blades, cutting through the already tense atmosphere between them. He felt the weight of what had been revealed, but there was more. Something deeper, something he still couldn't understand. The betrayal was there, exposed, but it wasn't the only thing that bothered him. Something about the way Olivia and Ryan looked at each other, something about the silences between the words, made him feel like there was more hidden in the story. "And why Ryan, Olivia? Why him?" Ethan asked, his voice now lower but still filled with pain. "Of all the people in the world, why did you choose my best friend?" Olivia looked at him, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying. She tried to find the words, but each attempt seemed to make the situation even worse. "I don't know," she whispered. "It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. I was feeling alone, you were always so distant, so focused on work, and Ryan was there, he was there." Ethan closed his eyes, trying to process Olivia's words. Her feeling of loneliness didn't justify what she had done, but, somehow, it made sense. In the last few months, the air seemed to have become thicker, as if the revelation of the betrayal had altered the very environment around them. Ethan, with his eyes fixed on Olivia, felt the weight of all his emotions dragging him to a dark place inside him. The words echoed in her mind, "I was alone, but no justification, however sincere, could heal the open wound." Ryan remained silent, as if he knew that any attempt at explanation would only worsen the situation. He glanced at Ethan, but couldn't maintain eye contact for long. They both knew there was no going back, not after Olivia's confession, and even less after the way everything was revealed. Ethan felt a mixture of anger and helplessness. Why couldn't you see it before? The long hours of work, the emotional distance that he now saw clearly. Everything had contributed to that betrayal. He knew, somehow, that he wasn't just a victim. He had failed at some point. That thought, however, did not alleviate the pain, it only intensified it. Olivia, still in tears, stepped forward, as if she wanted to touch Ethan, as if she wanted to find some remnant of the man she loved, who could forgive her. "Ethan, please, you need to understand. I didn't want things to come to this. I just felt so, alone. You weren't here anymore." These words echoed powerfully in his mind. How many times had he heard this justification in other betrayal stories? But now, he was the protagonist, the victim. He could understand the loneliness, he could even accept that he had distanced himself, but nothing justified the fact that Olivia had crossed a line that could not be undone. "Don't try to blame it on me, Olivia," Ethan said, his voice thick with bitterness. "I may have walked away, I may have failed to be present. But you had a choice. You could have spoken out, you could have fought for what we had. But instead, you chose to destroy everything we built. Silence fell over them again, and the only thing that seemed to move was the cold wind that blew across the porch. Olivia was now sobbing, unable to respond. He knew there was no excuse that could repair the damage he had caused. Ryan, still in the background, seemed to shrink under the weight of the situation. He had been the catalyst for all of this, but at that moment, he was also lost. He knew that Ethan not only saw him as a traitor, but also as someone who had stolen something sacred. However, before he could muster the courage to speak, Ethan interrupted him. "Do you feel satisfied, Ryan?" Ethan's voice was cold, distant. "You destroyed my trust. You, who I considered a brother. You knew what Olivia meant to me, you knew what we had. And yet you went ahead." Ryan finally spoke, his voice choked with shame and guilt. "Ethan, I don't know what to say. I can't justify what I did. I lost control. I thought I could keep everything under control, that I could. I don't know, walk away before things got out of control. But I was weak." Ethan looked at him with a mixture of anger and contempt. "Weak? Is that all you have to say? You weren't weak, Ryan. You made choices. You approached my wife, knowing you were crossing boundaries, and kept going. Don't pretend it was something that just happened. You were aware of every step." The moral dilemma facing Ethan was overwhelming. He knew he couldn't just accept what had happened, he knew that forgiving was something he might never be able to do. However, I also didn't know how to move forward. Olivia and Ryan's betrayal was something that ran much deeper than the simple physical act. It was an emotional betrayal, a breaking of bonds he thought were unbreakable. What to do now? End the marriage? Cut ties with the man who for years had been her anchor in difficult times? Doubt gnawed at him inside, and at the same time, he knew that any decision he made at that moment would be filled with anger and hurt. Ethan felt like he was at an emotional dead end. The anger boiling inside him begged for a reaction, for an explosion. But he also knew that any rash choice could have even more devastating consequences. Olivia, her face marked by tears, tried once again to get closer. "Ethan. I know I can't change what I did. But please, just listen to me. I still love you. I was wrong, yes, but what we had is still real to me. Don't throw it all away because of an error. A mistake." Ethan repeated in disbelief. "You call this a mistake, Olivia? This was a choice. You chose to betray, you chose to destroy me. Don't try to minimize what happened as something minor." Olivia's eyes, now filled with despair, searched for any sign that there was hope, that somehow he might forgive her. But Ethan was far from ready for that. He knew that, at that moment, any step towards forgiveness would be an insult to the very pain he felt. Ryan finally approached Ethan, his face serious and somber. "I screwed up, Ethan, I know. I can't ask for forgiveness, because there's nothing I can do to fix what I broke. I just want you to know that, it was never my intention to destroy your life. But in the end, after all, that's what I did. And I'll carry that guilt for the rest of my life." Ryan's words sounded sincere, but Ethan didn't know if he could trust anything he said. The truth is, at that point, there was no turning back. There were no words that could undo the betrayal, much less the devastating impact it had on everyone involved. Ethan's dilemma now was much more than simply deciding whether to forgive or not. It was about rebuilding his own life, about understanding how to move forward after having his world torn apart by those he trusted most. The silence after Ryan's words was deafening. Ethan looked at the two of them, as if he were miles away. He felt the weight of betrayal crush his shoulders, but at the same time, there was something different inside him. A tiredness that went beyond anger, beyond disappointment. It was the exhaustion of someone who no longer had the strength to fight. He looked at Olivia, the woman he loved for so many years, and Ryan, the friend he considered a brother. And at that moment, the only thing he wanted was for it all to end. "I can't look at you guys," Ethan finally said, his voice low, barely audible. "I thought I had a marriage, I thought I had a friend, a life I could trust. But now, it all seems like a lie." Olivia sobbed, desperate to find a way to make him understand, to make him forgive. But she knew deep down that it was already too late. She had destroyed the only man who truly knew her. And no matter how hard he tried, there was no undoing what had been done. "Ethan, please, can we try again, fix things?" Olivia began, but Ethan raised his hand, cutting her off. "Fix it," he repeated bitterly. "There's no fix for this. I could try to forgive you, I could even pretend I can get past it, but that would be a lie. I can't look at you and see the woman I married anymore. I see someone else. Someone who deceived me, who betrayed me." Olivia fell silent, knowing that this time, Ethan's words were final. There was nothing more to say. She had destroyed what was unbreakable. And now, only the shadow of what they once were remained. And then, he turned to Ryan. The man with whom he had shared so many moments, confidences and laughs. The man who now represented the greatest betrayal of her life. "You were like a brother to me," Ethan said, his voice filled with a sadness that went beyond anger. "But brothers don't do what you did. I trusted you, I trusted your friendship. And yet you chose to destroy all of that." Ryan couldn't speak. There was no apology that could erase the damage. He knew that this was the end of their friendship, the end of any bond that had once united them. All that was left now was emptiness. Ethan took a step back, as if he was distancing himself not only physically, but emotionally from the two. He knew that, in order to continue living, he needed to cut what was left of those ties. And that's what he would do. "You two can stay together if you want," he said, his voice sounding distant. "But I'm out of this. I don't want any more part of a life built on lies. Everything we had died today. And there's nothing left here for me." Olivia sobbed, and Ryan hung his head in defeat. They knew that, in that moment, they had lost not only Ethan, but also the chance to repair what they had destroyed. Ethan, in turn, felt a strange sense of freedom. For the first time in months, he was no longer trapped by the uncertainties, the suspicions that gnawed at his mind. Now the truth was exposed, naked and raw. And despite the pain, he knew he would move on. "I'm leaving," he said, before turning to leave the porch. "And you too can move on with your lives. But know one thing, I will never forget what you did. And I hope you never forget either." And without another word, he walked away, walking out of the party, out of the life he once considered solid and impenetrable. As Ethan walked through the night, he felt the weight of what had just happened. There was no longer anger burning in his chest, only a cold, melancholy acceptance. He knew the future would be difficult, lonely perhaps, but at least it would be a future free of lies. As for Olivia and Ryan, they stayed there, on the porch, trapped in their own silence. The party continued in the background, the laughter and music now distant and surreal, as if they no longer belonged to the same world. They knew they could never go back to that moment before everything fell apart. The betrayal between them had not only destroyed Ethan, but it had also left deep scars between the two. No matter what happened from that point on, what was left was only guilt and regret. Ethan disappeared into the night, leaving behind not only his wife and his friend, but also a part of himself that would never return. What did you think of this story? Share your opinion in the comments. And if you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more impactful stories like this.